So, recently 343 Industries added a new skin to Halo Infinite, the Combat Evolved Mark V armor set. And like most things in Halo Infinite, it sparked a bit of controversy because they're charging $20 for it. Right now on the Xbox store, you can actually buy Halo Combat Evolved and 5 other Halo games for less money than that. This isn't surprising coming from Halo Infinite. The game's entire purpose is cashing in on nostalgia. It started with an entire season themed around Halo Reach, but what I found interesting about the Halo 1 armor is it was clear that this time, I was not the target. With Halo Reach, I was the target. Halo Reach was my childhood. But Halo 1? Halo 1 was old when I was a kid. Nostalgia is always at its most bare when you can see it coming from the people who aren't your peers. This connection makes it really obvious what's going on, because guess what? People are buying that $20 armor set, lots of people, even though the game it's from is older than most of the player base, a game that, if we're being totally honest, does not hold up to a modern audience. The controls are floaty and weird, the graphics look incredibly dated, even the glossy remaster is dated now. Halo Combat Evolved may be a definitive landmark game, but a kid today isn't going to make it past the first mission. As a critic, I consider nostalgia to be my arch nemesis. Nostalgia is a haze that prevents you from thinking about things critically. I genuinely wonder if people realise that when they talk about the best games ever made, they're almost always talking about the games that happened to come out when they were kids. When people talk about how a game has this vibe that no other game has ever captured, 95% of the time they're talking about nostalgia. I know that I am not immune to this. What are some of my favourite games? Halo 3 ODST, Borderlands 2, Mass Effect, Assassin's Creed 4, Wizard 101. These are all games that came out when I was between the ages of 9 and 14. I know that these are good games. But I also know that if you handed a modern 12-year-old a copy of Borderlands 2, he'd probably throw it in the trash. I know this because I played Halo 1 as a kid and I thought it was old, boring and crap. I know how this works. But I also know I would still argue with that kid. How dare you? Borderlands 2 is goddamn masterpiece and set the standard for every looter shooter to come in the last decade. And because of nostalgia, I can never be sure if I'm telling the truth, or I've just been infected with the nostalgia brainworms I caught when I was a child. Maybe this is a real roadblock as a critic, or maybe it's just a devastating reminder that Abe Simpson was right all along and the inevitable march of time makes relics of us all.
I used to be with it, but then they changed what it was. Now what I'm with isn't it, and what's it seems weird and scary to me. It'll happen to you.
There isn't a medium of art that ages worse than games. Old games aren't just harder to look at, they're harder to experience. As technology improves, a lot of stuff gets left behind. A lot of older games just won't even run anymore on modern hardware. They weren't designed for computers that run faster than a calculator. Even if you can play them, we get used to a lot of modern luxuries in games that simply hadn't been created yet when you go back. Like customizable controls, or the expectation that the game will make it clear where you're actually supposed to go, or checkpoints that don't just instantly kill you. I think that almost everyone has a point at which a game is just too old to be enjoyable to play, and for me, Halo 1 is that cut-off point. At a certain point, games stop being something you play and start being something you study. This causes issues for me when trying to put Halo 1 into a broader cultural perspective. If nostalgia has one advantage, it's that I am deeply knowledgeable about the games I played as a kid. I understand all of their influences and innovations, and I've watched in real time as those influences spread into modern games. I don't have that innate knowledge for Halo 1. I can't put myself into the mindset of someone who's never played anything like this before. Because in a very real way, everything I've played is like Halo 1. It's one of the foundational ancestors of the modern landscape of video games, and that's how I've always perceived it, as the beginning. The idea that Halo 1 itself was an innovation based on things that came before, it's hard for me to imagine. Really, a retrospective of Halo should probably start with Marathon, but that's a pathway into darkness that I am not prepared to face. As time marches on, the things that made Halo such an icon start to become lost, and that is sad in some ways. If you care about tracking the evolution of video games anyway, the meaning of the title Combat Evolved loses its importance to the generation who don't actually know what Halo was an evolution of. So, where does that leave me? Well, it means I'm not really a game reviewer at this point when talking about this game. I'm a historian. I can't explain why I think this game is amazing, because that's not the emotion I feel while playing it. I can only explain why other people thought it was amazing and track its influence on the games to come that I do think are amazing. Maybe I don't love this game, maybe I wouldn't choose to play it just for fun, but I do respect it, and I've always thought history was interesting. And the Halo series is a perfect lens to track the evolution of game design over the past 2 decades, from the era when jumping was still an exciting feature, to our modern hellscape of live services and microtransactions. This video is for the people who will never play Halo Combat Evolved, and I'm not even going to suggest that you should. You're not here for a recommendation. You're here to study, because hey, this stuff is your history. Halo is so iconic these days that it feels a little bit silly to even bother with an introduction to the story and the setting. It's like explaining the basics of Star Wars to someone, it feels a little redundant. But true to my word, I'll assume you have no prior knowledge of this game or the series. Halo is set in the far future. Humanity has expanded across the stars and come into contact with a hostile religious faction of aliens called the Covenant. For the last 20 years, we've been fighting a losing war against the Covenant, and our story picks up as one ship, the Pillar of Autumn, has fled a losing battle with a random slip space jump to make sure that they don't accidentally lead the Covenant to Earth. That random jump has taken them somewhere unexpected, a massive floating ring in space. Halo. But there's no time to study as the Covenant followed you here, and it's time to abandon ship. You play as the otherwise unnamed Master Chief, the last survivor of a cyborg super soldier program, and it's your job to take the ship's AI, Cortana, and make sure she isn't captured by the Covenant.
Protocol is clear. Destruction or capture of a shipboard AI is absolutely unacceptable, and that means you're leaving ship. Lock in a selection of emergency landing zones, upload them to my neural lace, and then sort yourself for a heart transfer.
Aye, aye, sir.
Which is where you come in, Chief. Get Cortana off this ship. Keep her safe from the enemy. If they capture her, they'll learn everything. Force deployment, weapons research, Earth.
I understand.
That's our setup. Stranded and outnumbered on a mysterious ancient ring, you have to find a way to survive. It's not even accurate to say that Halo was popular, it's more accurate to say that Halo was inescapable. The Xbox as it exists today would not have happened if not for Halo. You didn't buy an Xbox, you bought a Halo machine. That's not an exaggeration. Reviews at the time often said that the Xbox was worth buying purely so you can play Halo. I can't even imagine a game having that kind of impact today. Even the best of the best console launch exclusives don't get that kind of reception. You don't reach that level of success and fame without some serious innovation. So what was Halo's big evolution? Well, basically every single thing about it. It's really hard to overstate just how important Halo is to the modern landscape. Halo Combat Evolved isn't famous for a good story, it's famous for being one of the first shooters to have a big cinematic story at all. It's not famous for good shooting mechanics, it's famous for completely revolutionising shooting mechanics and proving that console shooters are a viable medium. A lot of the fundamental building blocks of the modern FPS trace their lineage to this game, like the idea of only being able to carry 2 guns, forcing you to make tactical decisions on what guns to bring. This was new. Before this, in games like Doom, you just have access to a big roster of weapons that you switch between. Every FPS that isn't a deliberate throwback now uses that system. It's become so completely synonymous with the genre that you don't even question where it came from anymore. It comes from this game. The idea of a sandbox approach to level design where the player is offered multiple approaches to a situation feels like something so basic that it's literally always existed. But no, Halo Combat Evolved was the pioneer of that kind of design. Before this, games were all about finding the one solution to a problem. The second mission of the game, just called Halo, has 3 squads of Marines that you have to go find and protect, which you can do in any order, and the fact that you can do them in any order is completely revolutionary to anything that had come before. The fact that enemies take cover when you shoot them is completely revolutionary. The fact that you can seamlessly get in and out of vehicles is completely revolutionary. The idea that you can punch someone without switching to your fists is completely revolutionary. That's why it can be so hard for a modern player to appreciate what makes Halo special. All of its innovations have become so standard across the entire medium that it's impossible to imagine a gaming landscape where these things were actually new and unique. Shooters are such a dominant part of the console gaming market these days that it's impossible to imagine that at the time of Halo's release, people didn't think it was possible to make a shooter that actually felt good to play on a controller, and if you've ever played a console shooter from before Halo, then you know why. Halo feels sluggish and floaty compared to a modern shooter, but compared to the other shooters of the time, it feels incredible. At a purely mechanical level, it's understandable why Halo was so popular and so groundbreaking. And mechanics alone would be enough to make Halo a foundational title, but that's not why it's become so iconic. They say that the best art provokes emotion, and Halo sought to provoke one emotion in particular. An emotion that no game had really been able to try and capture before, one that requires an immense level of confidence to even aim for. Aww. They wanted you to look at the digital world they had created and be amazed. There's a combination of incredibly confident design choices that go into provoking that emotion, and absolutely none of them have got anything to do with shooting people. The pacing of the game is one of them. The first mission of the game, fighting off invaders on the Autumn, is a great place to start because it's a network of industrial-looking hallways, which is the praised standard look for shooters at the time, a chance to get familiar with Halo's new mechanics in an old atmosphere. But the second mission is where Halo truly unfolds. Giant open environments like this were pretty much impossible up until this console generation, which is why the game gives you plenty of time without enemies to just admire the world. First there's some on-foot skirmishes around a strange alien structure, then you get a jeep to drive around in, you head underground into a mysterious but massive cave network, and finally you reach this moment, emerging into the light, into Halo. To me, it's the most iconic moment in the entire game, a confident statement of intention. You're impressed by this, and they know it, and they will magnify that feeling tenfold with the music. It's not just that Halo's music is good, which it is, it's amazing. It's that the music is used in an incredibly cinematic way. Halo wasn't scored like a traditional video game, it's scored like a movie. You don't have a combat track and an ambient track and a tension track. Instead, the music is synchronized to punctuate different moments of the game with a specific tone or emotion. It bounces between all sorts of different genres and instruments, but each piece feels tailor-made for the exact moment when it kicks in. It has the confidence to say, here, we're going to have some Gregorian chanting.
I'm going to use your suit's transcom system to monitor their chatter.
This part is crying out for an electric guitar riff. This firefight would be better punctuated by some lounge music. And it has the talent for all of these decisions to be completely spot on. Halo's push towards being more cinematic might seem quaint now when games emulating cinema is the norm, and even kind of tedious at this point, but at the time, this was something brand new. The idea of being able to play through the events of a blockbuster movie was something truly special, and even if the visuals look dated now, the quality of the music alone can still carry a lot of these moments. The story is not deep in a way that you might expect from a game famous for its story. Rather, the story is supposed to feel like a classic sci-fi action movie in the way it unfolds, with its twist betrayals and moments of comedy and emotion and action. There is a black hole of lore to delve into if you're really curious, but knowing all that stuff isn't necessary to following along with Halo 1. And, in fact, knowing more about Halo lore might be pure brain poison, but we'll save that for another video. It's not wholly original. In fact, the game steals entire scenes from popular movies in a way that you could never get away with nowadays. Like this scene that's ripped in its entirety from the beginning of Predator, which itself is within a clear Blair Witch found footage horror moment, with the Blair Witch Project only having come out a few years previous. There's other obvious references too, like Aliens, Star Wars, and especially Starship Troopers. That kind of direct from-the-screen adaptation has had a massive shift in perception over the years. Now it would be seen as incredibly lazy, possibly even scandalous. But at the time it was exciting. After years of just watching movies, now you could be in the movie. But I'm getting ahead of myself, because that's the big twist of Halo's story, and we're not quite ready for that yet. After crashing on the ring and rounding up some survivors, you mount a sniper-armed nighttime rescue for Captain Keyes, having gone down with the ship and been captured by the Covenant. He reveals that Halo is no ordinary space ring, and from listening in on his captors, they seem to hold it in some form of great religious significance. They believe it to be some kind of weapon, so your mission changes. You need to figure out what Halo is, and if possible, how to turn it against the Covenant.
That's true. The Covenant kept saying that whoever controls Halo controls the fate of the universe.
This leads into what many consider to be the iconic mission of Halo 1, and I agree. The Silent Cartographer. The entire level is just one big island, and the only info you get at the start is that somewhere underneath this island is a map that will point you in the direction of Halo's control room. You can find the facility early, but the Covenant lock it down, so you'll have to look around for a way to disable the security in a different facility on the island. Except, if you already know about the security lockdown, you could just come here first and disable it before they have a chance to lock you out. Or, if you're fast enough, you can run in before they get a chance to lock you out. Either of these options is compensated for in the game. It's everything that made Halo so iconic boiled down to one level. That freedom to experiment with different approaches combined with a wide area to explore. And that cinematic quality too. The mission starts by storming the beach with a group of Marines and ends with that electric guitar-driven escape sequence. It's everything that a generation of games over the next decade would strive to emulate in a single level. The next mission is a snowy tank assault on the control room, and when you get there, Cortana plugs herself in and starts exploring the system. She starts explaining that the ring was built by a race called the Forerunners, but she's distracted by something.
Yes, the Forerunner built this place, what they called a fortress world, in order to... Wait. No, that can't be. Oh, those Covenant fools. They must have known. There must have been signs.
Slow down. You're losing me.
The Covenant found something. Buried in this ring, something horrible, and now they're afraid.
Something buried? Where?
The captain. We've got to stop the captain.
Keys? What
The
are
weapons cache he's looking for. It's not really... We can't let him get inside.
I don't understand.
There's no time. Get out of here, find Keys, stop him. Before it's too late!
I should point out that full voice acting was still a bit of a novelty in games at the time, and having a cast as solid as this one, especially Jen Taylor as Cortana, is another important key to the game's cinematic quality. The Chief himself is a man of few words and only really talks when necessary, but Cortana is a friendly voice throughout, helpful, expressive, and a little bit snarky when the situation calls for it. Having that friendly, helpful voice in your head is extra important because for the next few missions, it'll be gone as the game takes a massive tonal shift into full-blown horror. A lot of older games can be kind of unintentionally scary. Low draw distances and low resolution models for monsters mean that the imagination can get up to some spooky stuff. But the next level is intentionally scary, and it's damn good at it, which is why for years it was my most hated mission until I got over myself. It starts by establishing a totally different mood to the rest of the game so far. It's a dark swamp. The vastness and openness that you've become used to by now in the game is replaced by a thick, dark fog which barely lets you see in front of you. The Covenant are running away from something inside this facility, but it won't reveal itself to you yet. Instead, you wander around the empty, cramped and bloody halls waiting for something to jump out at you, but it doesn't happen. You find a Marine scared out of his mind, shooting anything that moves, unable to be reasoned with, and shouting something about things in the darkness. And then you find a helmet with no body around that it could have belonged to. Master Chief pulls out a video playback to see what happened, and we follow the Marines on their own expedition into the facility. They make it to the room that you're standing in and are attacked by something. Weird little bug things that crawl up and into you. And then they start swarming the room and the music goes full psycho. This is the Flood, the secret second faction of enemies in the game. The game does an excellent job of escalating the threat that the Flood poses. At first it's just these little things. They can kill you if you get totally swarmed, but they're easy enough to manage. Then the infected forms run in. Humans and aliens alike malformed into these horrific fleshy masses. Creepy, but just zombies, right? Well, then you get back to the elevator you came in on and it explodes, and the Flood starts attacking you with guns. Not just zombies, an intelligent, sentient parasite. The mission is a maze of similar looking rooms and cramped hallways. You truly feel trapped and alone. When you get to another elevator and instead of going up, it takes you even further down, the dread truly comes through, even all these years later. It's a flawlessly executed twist that changes the entire direction of the second half of the game. But it's also when the game loses some people because, unfortunately, it's a second half that's just not as good as the first. Because this mission is followed up with a trip to the library. You're rescued from the swamp by a mysterious little floating robot orb named 343 Guilty Spark, who claims to be the monitor of the ring. With the Flood released, containment procedures must be followed. The ring must be activated to stop the floods. He teleports you back to the library in order to find something called the Index, which will allow you to activate Halo back at the control room. Guilty Spark is a truly fascinating character. He treats the entire situation with a sort of chipper benignness. Like, yeah, we need to hurry, but everything's going to plan, so it'll be fine. He hums as he works, and he talks to you like he assumes you already know who he is, a detail that won't actually make sense until Halo 4, a full decade and a bit later. Of all the ancient AIs I've seen in sci-fi, Guilty Spark is the one that feels the most truly ancient, because he's not big and grandiose. He's a kooky weirdo who's been alone for thousands of years, and even if the situation is dire, he's really happy to have someone to talk to again. Unfortunately, he doesn't make up for the fact that the mission itself is the worst in the whole game, quite possibly the worst in the entire series, though some of the endless bland hallways in Infinite may give it a run for its money. The library has 4 floors. Each of them are completely identical grey hallways, and each of them are absolutely jam-packed with Flood. The introduction of the Flood is great, but the truth is that the Flood are much less interesting to actually fight than the Covenant when you get over the fear factor. They don't react in interesting ways like the Covenant do, and they have less variation than the Covenant. The Covenant remain mostly mysterious throughout this game. Leave it to Halo 2 to properly flesh them out. But through gameplay, a clear hierarchy emerges. You've got the grunts, the little guys who are easy to take out and often run away when you kill the bigger enemies. The jackals, armed with shields that you have to get behind to hit or aim carefully for a small gap where their arm is. The elites, who are the only enemy who have a recharging shield like you do and are clearly in charge since they come in different colours to show their strength and superiority. And then finally there's the massive armoured hunters who can only be killed with heavy explosives or by shooting the weak point in their back. Fighting the Covenant always feels like a full test of your skills, staying mobile and learning which weapons are most effective at dealing with different kinds of enemies. Even 20 years later, without those modern touches, that effect still comes through. The Flood are much less interesting. They mostly just run at you so you can mow them down with a shotgun, except for these hunchback guys who walk up to you and explode, so you have to keep them at a distance. It's a regression from the design that makes Halo so interesting back to an older style of just shooting hordes of dumb monsters in similar looking hallways like Doom would provide. And the library is a long mission. In the anniversary version, there's an achievement for beating this level in under half an hour, which is genuinely a challenge if you're unable to cheese through it with grenade jumps. Honestly, there's a line in this mission that fills me with more dread than the entirety of the last mission.
Please follow closely. This portal is the first of 10.
Because the design of these hallways is all pretty much identical, it's extremely easy to get lost in this level because it's super unclear what turns you're supposed to take and what turn you're only supposed to take when you get to this identical spot on the next floor up. The Master Chief Collection adds arrows on the floor to tell you where you're supposed to go, but the original version of the game you just had to hope and pray that you found the right turn before the endlessly respawning enemies got through all of your ammo. The library also marks the last fully new environment in the game, as the next 3 levels are all a return to the old levels played backwards. First, the icy canyons around the control room, now at night, then a return to the Covenant ship, now overrun with flood, and finally, looping the whole journey, a return to the abandoned and crashed Pillar of Autumn. That last one works. The other 2 I could do without. When you're finally able to grab the index and return to the control room, Cortana reveals the truth of what's really going on. Halo isn't just a weapon that will kill the Flood. It's a doomsday device that will kill everything in the universe. The Flood and its food, as the Forerunners believe that this was the only way to stop the parasite.
You have no idea how this ring works, do you? Why the Forerunners built it? Halo doesn't kill Flood. It kills their food. Humans, Covenant, whatever. We're all equally edible. The only way to stop the Flood is to starve them to death. And that's exactly what Halo is designed to do. Wipe the galaxy clean of all sentient life. You don't believe me? Ask him.
Is it true?
More or less. Technically, this installation's pulse has a maximum effective radius of 25,000 light years. But once the others follow suit, this galaxy will be quite devoid of life. Or at least any life with sufficient biomass to sustain the Flood. But you already knew that. I mean, how couldn't you?
Left out that little detail, did he?
This is a good scene, and Guilty Spark seamlessly flows from ally to enemy in the same chipper tone that he's always had. But the actual mission is mostly just filler, running around the ice canyon to destroy some pylon things which are apparently important to the ring's charging sequence or something. Seeing the true chaos of the Flood, the Covenant, and now Guilty Spark Sentinels all fighting each other is quite fun, and it's the only mission to give you proper access to a Banshee, the Covenant's flying vehicle. But story and level design wise, we're spinning wheels. Cortana comes up with a new plan. They can overload the reactor of the crashed Pillar of Autumn to destroy Halo, ensuring that it can never be fired and the Flood can't escape. But to do that, they need to override codes within Captain Key's neural implants, and he's MIA. In the weirdest coincidence in the game, you find him in the same ship that he was imprisoned on the first time, though this time he's been caught by the Flood, and it's done something to him. Something that looks horrifically awful and painful, but that won't actually become clear until Halo 2. But the point is he's dead, so Chief punches his face in to grab the neural implants.
We can't let the Flood get off this ring. You know what he'd expect. What he'd want us to do. It's done. I have the code. We should go.
Finally, you arrive back at the Autumn for the finale. Walking through the ruined hallways of the Autumn feels different to the reuses of the other environments. It's a time to reflect on the journey. This was your home. It's the only part of the whole game that really feels human. The ring is big and beautiful, but clearly alien and dangerous. The Forerunner structures are old and mysterious, but also clinical and cold. The Covenant ship is entirely alien with its curved walls and love of the colour purple. The Autumn is industrial, sure, but it feels human-made, so seeing it in ruins is much more impactful than anything else. This place used to have a crew in the thousands. Now it's just you and Cortana. The entire ending is less triumphant than it is melancholy, a trend that would continue for the whole series. Your goal is to blow up this ship and the entire ring. Even with the Flood and the fact that it's a doomsday device, it's a marvel of engineering and design. To destroy it feels wrong. Guilty Spark tries to stop you, but after doing it manually, you get to the final section of the game. It's not a boss fight, instead it's an escape sequence. Driving along the Autumn to find an escape vehicle as the ship explodes around you. Of course you make it in the nick of time. Mission accomplished?
Shut them down. We'll need them later. Fancy a look?
This is a tragedy, no matter which way you look at it, and with the music punctuating it, even all these years later it still comes across. You won, but at what cost? Like the first part of most trilogies, Halo is a lot more self-contained than its sequels. Things could have ended here, and though it leaves a lot of open questions, it's a satisfying ending on its own. It would be unfair to claim that games had never done stories like Halo before. Half-Life had come out a few years previous and is probably even more revolutionary than Halo was. But what Halo's true trick is, and the reason it's maintained its legacy longer than most of its peers, is it's as much a matter of the things it doesn't have as the things that it does. Halo doesn't have any gimmicks, it doesn't have any boss fights or platforming or any puzzles, all of which would have been expected within the genre at the time. Even Half-Life is infamous for some of its jumping puzzles. Halo cut all of it to create an immensely streamlined experience. Halo has less weapons overall than other shooters of the time, but every weapon is designed with the two-weapon system in mind, so the game becomes a system of trade-offs. Every gun has utility, and every gun has limitations. Human weapons like the rifle or the pistol do more damage but are bad against shields. Plasma weapons are the opposite, good against shields but not as good against normal enemies. You can take a rocket launcher which will easily kill just about anything, but it's got limited ammo and uses up one of your precious weapon slots. There are shooters today that aren't able to balance their roster of weapons as well as Halo 1 did. Cutting all of the added baggage is what allowed Halo to reach a wider audience than any shooter had previously. It's the story of why console gaming is successful. It's simpler than PC gaming, and it always has been. You don't need to be a computer nerd to play Halo. There's no expectation that you understand weird archaic mechanics like crouch jumping. For better or for worse, I suppose, Halo is the beginning of the bro era of gaming, the time when it was a hobby not just of shy nerds, but of the jocks as well. Multiplayer is an important piece of the puzzle here too, but it doesn't reach its true potential until Halo 2. Halo 1 predates Xbox Live by a good few years, so while there are multiplayer modes, they could only be played in split screen or with System Link, as in, you would actually bring around another Xbox and plug them into each other. Doing this, you could technically get up to 16 players, which all in one place seems like an actual nightmare to me, but it was a fun novelty for the time. An interesting development though is that through the Master Chief Collection, that's not true anymore. Now, over 2 decades later, you can play online matchmaking for Halo 1. The Master Chief Collection is almost its own strange beast to tackle. On the one hand, it's just an insane value for money, 6 games all in a single package, and it is an admirable attempt at game preservation which I wish more companies would commit to. On the other hand, as the years have gone by, the Master Chief Collection has kind of evolved from just being a preservation project into its own thing entirely, with new cosmetics and even multiplayer maps added years after the fact. Some of which, especially in Halo 3's case, look incredibly discordant with the original artistic vision. The footage I've been using for this video is all from the Master Chief Collection because ultimately it's the most convenient way to play the game, and the remaster does something which I wish more games would let you do, which is that there's a button you can press to switch back to the old crappy graphics. Except, there is actually differences between this version of the old game and the original game. I already mentioned the floor arrows, but there are videos you can find here on YouTube that will document all of the changes if you're really curious. It's like I said at the beginning, old games just weren't designed to run on new hardware, and there are some things that end up changed in the process. I'm not quite puritanical enough to get riled up about that, but I certainly understand the feeling that something is being lost to time. For its part, the Master Chief Collection defaults to using the Anniversary Remaster graphics from 2011, and I think Halo Anniversary warrants its own discussion because it's a very strange project all round. The remaster is now older than Halo 1 was when the remaster came out, and despite the massive graphical and textual advancements in the 10 years between its release and the original, I actually think that the remaster has aged much worse than the original has. Part of that is certainly that it's not actually a remake, not like the new Resident Evil games. It's somewhere between remake and remaster. All of the textures, models, and even a lot of the environmental details have been totally remade, but they're sort of layered on top of the old game with all the old mechanics and animations maintained exactly. That's why you can click a button and instantly switch back to the old graphics. 10 years on, this makes it very, very weird to play. It's got the graphics of a 10-year-old game and the mechanics of a 20-year-old game, which is very strange. But the bigger reason it's aged so much worse than the original is the art style. They didn't update and modernise the art of the original game, instead they very awkwardly changed the game to look like Halo Reach, which was the new game at the time. But Halo Reach was a massive departure from the classic Halo look. Everything is a lot more grungy and over-designed. There seems to have been a rule in the creative process that absolutely no wall or surface is allowed to be flat, which leads to this incredibly busy look. All of the enemies use the same models as Halo Reach, but they've been squished into hitboxes and animations of a 10-year-old game, so they just look very weird. The new graphics and lighting also completely changed the atmosphere of the game in a lot of places, especially in the places that are supposed to be dark. There's a big difference in the atmosphere between a dark chasm and a very well-lit box. The biggest loss is the spooky swamp, which is now exceptionally well lit and not overly foggy, a change that totally ruins the atmosphere of the entire level. So yes, on a purely technical level it looks much better, and in the outdoor environments the remaster shines. There are other positive changes, like updating Cortana and Sergeant Johnson to be more consistent with their appearance in the later games, or the addition of secret terminals around each level that fill in some of the backstory and lore and connect more closely with the future titles. But overall, it's just not a very good remaster. It's not a modernization of the old art, rather it's a replacement of it, and that's just not the right way to go about it. If we go back to the start of this video, the Halo Infinite version of this armor is actually a lot more faithful to the original than the Anniversary version is. They found a much better balance with the Halo 2 remaster, but that's a story for another day. It's a strange twist to leave the game on, because the reality is that most players nowadays are probably going to play the game with the Anniversary graphics, which might be the wrong way to do it. The Anniversary remaster has become history just as much as the original game has, only the lesson of this one is negative. It's an example of what not to do. It's a nicer story when these massive successes come from an underdog, but that's not really the case with Halo. Bungie was already a successful company off the back of Marathon and Myth, and they were owned by Microsoft at the time of Halo's release. This is not the story of the little guy shining on top. Rather, it's the story of masters of the craft working on an amazing project during a time of amazing innovation. When you look at the factors involved, Halo's success isn't surprising. It's the natural culmination of where these games were always heading. It wouldn't have worked if it was bad, obviously, but that goes for any revolution. I don't feel those emotions that those original players had back in 2001. My most common feeling playing the game is a low-level frustration when I take another wrong turn down an identical grey hallway. But I do understand why they felt those emotions, and I hope I've been able to convey that understanding to you as well. Nostalgia may be my arch-nemesis, but without it, it can be hard to go back and enjoy these foundational games. Nostalgia helps you ignore problems, helps avoid comparisons to modern games. It just makes it feel better to play. I don't have that for Halo CE, but even still, I am able to understand it, and the truly great moments are still truly great, even all these years later. The Halo series over the years has become more and more insular and more complicated to follow as it delves deep into the deep lore. But every single game in the series always links back to the things started in this game. Both mechanically and story-wise, it's as foundational now as it was 20 years ago. That's not always a good thing, as we'll see, but I get it. When you've already reached the stars, it's pretty tempting to keep reaching back again.
We did what we had to do. For Earth. An entire Covenant armada obliterated, and the Flood. We had no choice. Halo. It's finished.
No. I think we're just getting started.
Thank you for watching, and a very special thank you to my patrons for your continued support. If you'd like to see your name up here or get access to Patreon exclusive videos, then please consider signing up. It would mean a lot to me. Christmas is coming up, and I'll be perfectly honest with you, I could really use some extra cash. If you're looking for more in-depth franchise retrospectives, then I have a series up here on the Saints Row series, or for the next part of this series, click down here. If it's not there yet, it will be. I'm future-proofing the video.